"Head for the porch, boy," he said gruffly. "Your pa's gone, and that's that." Doc didn't mean to be unkind, but his understanding of people was even scantier than his knowledge of medicine, and he simply saw no reason for Jed and his sister to stay in the room. Jed felt as if a knife had just been twisted in his heart. "Please, sir, just a moment or two." "I'm really sorry, lad. Really, I am," Doc replied, softening just a little bit. "But there's no reason to stay here with a dead man. Take your sister and head for the front porch." Sobbing and heartbroken, Jed and Mandy obeyed the gruff doctor, feeling as if their world had suddenly been shattered. Ma's death had been a tragic blow to both of them, but this was unthinkable. Life simply could not go on without Pa. Side by side, they sat on the porch steps, numb with sorrow. A huge gray dog trotted around the corner of the house, nosing his muzzle into his master's hand. He did his best to comfort the boy. Jed stroked the enormous head. "What will we do, Wolf?" he sobbed. "What will we do without Pa?" Late that night, Jed felt cold and hollow inside as he stared out the window at the moonlit farmyard. It was well past midnight, but tonight, the corn shuck mattress, it just felt so hard. He just could not fall asleep. The neighbors had all left, that is, except for old Mr. Pearson, a bachelor farmer who had no family of his own, and had therefore volunteered to sit with Pa's body, and the farmhouse was quiet. Tonight it was not peaceful, friendly. It was not the quiet that Jed was used to. Tonight the house seemed cold, empty, and so very lonely. Jed shivered. He thought of Pa's body lying there in the sitting room, so still and lifeless and strange, and he drew in his breath in a sobbing, mournful gasp. Pa dead? The very idea seemed so strange, so impossible. How could Pa be dead? "Pa was my best friend," he whispered softly. "He loved me." He choked back a sob. "We went fishing and hunting and bee robbing and trapping and Pa, I need you." The ache in his heart grew bigger and bigger until he thought that he could not possibly draw another breath. "Jed?" Mandy's whisper startled him, causing him to recoil in fright. He took a deep breath. "I'm here, Mandy." Mandy was crying softly. "Jed, will we ever see Ma and Pa again? Did they go to heaven?" Jed slipped out of bed and crept across the room. He knelt beside Mandy's bed and gently rubbed her arm and shoulder in an awkward attempt to comfort and reassure her. "I don't know, sis," he whispered reluctantly, trying hard to choke back the tears for her sake. "I wish I knew." "What will we do now, Jed?" The window admitted just enough of the silver moonlight so that Jed could see her face, pale, fearful, and stained with tears. His heart ached for her. I don't know, Mandy," he answered slowly, hesitantly. She was voicing the very question that he had been afraid to even think about. I suppose one of the neighbors will take us in, or..." His voice trailed off. He rose to his feet, but she grabbed his arm. "Please stay here beside me, Jed, just for a few more minutes." He patted her arm and smiled at her as he sank back to his knees beside the bed. "I'm right here, Mandy." Half an hour later, his chin dropped slowly to the edge of her cornshuck mattress, and he fell asleep, still on his knees. Wolf lay on the floor beside him, his eyes alert and watchful. The big dog was keenly aware that something was troubling his young master, and he dropped his head to his paws, but stayed awake, just watching Jed. Jed was just finishing the last of the cornmeal mush that Mr. Pearson had fixed for breakfast when a horse nickered in the yard. Moments later, there came a sound of a heavy tread on the front porch, and then the door opened. Sheriff Taggart entered the room with his hat in his big hands. "I'm sorry, kids, about your ma and pa," he said quietly and awkwardly, while twisting the brim of the hat as he spoke. He looked at the floor, as if he was afraid to meet their gaze. "It's a tough break for any kids, but losing both? I'm really sorry." Chef Taggart was a huge man with a big belly and the largest mustache that Jed had ever seen. His eyes were huge and round, and his mustache wiggled from side to side when he talked, which usually reminded Jed of the big blue catfish that Pa had caught in the river. But today, Jed was not thinking of the catfish. The sheriff was hardly more than a blur to him, even though Jed did his best to blink back the tears that kept threatening. The sheriff cleared his throat. "I'm here," he said slowly and nervously, "to take you to, your new home." Jed looked up in alarm. "Our new home?" he echoed. "But what about the burying?" There won't be much of a funeral, son," the sheriff said, not unkindly. He cleared his throat again. "There won't be a church service or nothing. It'll just be a few moments at the graveside, so you won't miss much. Your folks were not church-going people, son, so how much can the parson say about them? It won't take more than 5 minutes, 10 at the most." The boy hung his head and blinked back the tears again. "So I'm here to take you to your new home." Mandy spoke up. "Where are we going to live?" The lawman studied the floor. His meaty hands were now crushing the hat into a shapeless wad. You'll be staying at the..." He faltered, stopped, and then tried again. "You'll be living at the Charity Home for Children. It's in Kewanee, not more than 15 miles from here." "An orphanage?" Jed stared at him. "You're taking us to an orphanage?" It's a nice place, son," Sheriff Taggart said lamely, attempting to meet Jed's gaze for the first time. "You'll like it." He coughed nervously. "I promise." "But what about a real home?" the boy protested. "Surely there's someone who will take us in." The sheriff shrugged helplessly. "You ain't got any relatives in these parts, boy." "But what about one of the neighbors? One of them could adopt us." Jed was desperate. "Times are hard, son. Folks are mighty hard just to feed their own families. What with the blight last year and the drought this year, son, you know what it's like. Corn standing in the field, just withering away, like someone was baking the stalks in an oven. There's not going to be no harvest to speak of in these parts this fall. No, son, folks are not going to have an easy time of it this fall or winter. I reckon that 1860 will long be remembered as one of the worst years ever."